Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to talk about some common print fails for your prints and some common ways you can fix them, which will help you save yourself a lot of time and headaches. Anyway, I won't cut around too much with this one. We'll get right into it. All right, here we are in our old familiar lychee slicer, and yes, I do like to use lychee slicer. Regardless, I'm going to start showing some more slicer stuff as you've seen in a couple episodes over the last month. But for this particular episode, we're going to talk about Lychee Slicer just because you guys are more common with that. That's probably a larger portion of my audience anyway, and just because it's one of the ones I like to use and I'm more familiar with it than anything else. Anyway, all besides all that, we're taking a look at some pre-supported files that I have here from one of my favorite artists, Gaz Minis, and this is like a kind of a pseudo Warhammer-esque character, in case you couldn't tell by the accoutrements and some of the armor effects. But one of the things that people often overlook when they get a pre-supported file is they don't see. Now, if you're not using Lychee Slicer, I guess this is where you lose out on this one. They'll often just import that STL that's supported, and then they'll print it off. Now, if you're using Lychee, you can import the LYS files if they have supplied them, and then you can actually check for islands and you can modify the supports. You can check for proximity problems. You can check for islands, which I found, and you can resolve a lot of common print problems right there. Because the most common issue with beginner printers is the island problem. Then, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I mean, whatever, we'll get as into this as we can. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So, turn off that. If you look here where the support's touching. Okay. If we look at it from this view, you notice how some of these objects here, some of these pieces, they're forming out in space, right? So if a support wasn't carrying them, they wouldn't be able to form. They would stick to the build plate or stick to the vat, and you'd have a fail. So common ways to fix this is to use something like Lychee Slicer or UV tools and check your islands. I can't stress this more. When people do pre-support work, they don't know what printer you have. They checked the file at their resolution on their printer, and it's not always going to be 100% accurate to your printer because your printer has a different size, different resolution, different screen, etc. That changes a lot of things. As you see here, I'm changing my layer height from what was originally pre-supported. I found tons of islands, 40. So if I didn't catch those, we would have a much larger problem on our hands. But you can catch those and you can fix that. That is an easy problem to solve. Another common issue or common support I'm losing myself here. Another common fail problem is when people are faced with objects with flat surfaces. People will oftentimes simply just do a perimeter run, and they won't do any supports in the middle. Now, this one obviously has some islands that still need addressing, but it's supported pretty well. There's a couple gaps in here in the middle I would probably fill in personally, um, but for the most part, at least there is more than just the perimeter. There's a couple of different ways you can do supporting like this on flat objects, especially bases. There's the double row method. There's this, you can do a method like this. If you want to make it really easy and you're using Lychee Slicer, there's actually a way to do it that's even better. I'll show you. This is just a little hot tip from me. And here, we'll go ahead and make a copy of the object as well, so that way I don't lose what I'm doing here. Delete that other island. Okay, so Let me go ahead and go back to my layout screen, and then I'm going to just hide these objects. We'll make a copy of this. Okay. Remove that one. Move this one over, and then I'm going to delete the supports. Okay. So in this case, the bottom's flat. Like there's nothing here except for like the little tiny hole and the little gap. So we're going to go over to the manual support tab, and then we're going to go over to the start support projection down here at the very bottom. And use the surface crease and click the whole bottom here. Preview. And you're going to want to choose a nice close diameter to give yourself, nice interval to give yourself a nice grid around the outside and the inside. I usually go pretty tight when I'm doing flat objects like this. And I'll use like a medium light support. And then boom. There you go. That object is pretty much supported. I mean, here we can just do an island check real quick. There we go. 2 islands. Where are they? Oh, right here on the edge. Oh, look at that. Didn't get that area. Okay. See, it's not perfect. This is why it's very important that you check for islands. And since this is the starting edge over here, I'm going to put a few extra supports just to make sure that edge comes out nice and clean. And there we go. That is actually pretty much ready to print. Like I would print that. You're good to go. And the original one doesn't look too much different. They just didn't cluster them as thick as I did in here. Mine are a little bit thicker. That's a little bigger. But regardless, it would come out pretty good, just the same. Some other common issues that people face are when they work on things like heads. And the biggest issue that I hear with folks talking about heads is the orientation. So, common thing you can do to fix orientation is make sure that when you orient and support your heads, that the faces are always pointing up. Like the eyes should be looking either at the sky or really close to the sky. If you can even turn them on their heads sometimes if they've got really complicated hairstyles and stuff like that, and you don't want to worry about all them tiny little islands on their hair. These are fairly simple, so it's not really much to worry about. But again, if it was something more complicated, you can flip them upside down and you can kind of support them from their hair back. And I know that seems weird, but you wouldn't be using super heavy supports up here, so you wouldn't be leaving too many support marks. But that's another common one that people deal with a lot. Another issue I hear people deal with quite commonly as far as failures, that's something you can fix quite easily, is just essentially failing to check the print at different layer heights. Now, even if you're working with a pre-support file that you know is going to work, like it's from a reputable person, always check your print at different layer heights. This is a way to make sure that you get the islands at every single layer. And I'll show you what I mean. So we're at 17 microns right now. We can change this to 35. And then if I highlight these 2 objects, we'll check these islands again. Now we just found 40 islands. Okay, it did not find any more. It may not find any. Sometimes it'll catch them all the first try, but in a lot of cases, it will catch additional islands. Okay, nothing on those objects. Let's check something a little bit more complicated. Should we look at her body? Yeah, that'll probably have some more. So let's take a look at that. And this one takes a little bit longer, obviously, because it's a bigger object. But regardless, I think this one should have a few extra islands. Let's see if it does catch any. I will honestly be surprised if it caught them all at 17 and I didn't have to check them again between 35 and 50. But, sometimes the program likes to make me look bad. So, could be one of those days. Oh, look, it caught one. Thanks, Lychee Slicer. Anyway, that just means it did a really good job the first run, and it doesn't have to do much more after that. So we can go ahead and apply that additional one. Again, we can check it at 35, because if it found one more at 50, there is a chance that you could find another island at the other layer height. This is the reason why I'll go up and down and I'll check at these different heights, because there's a chance that one layer height could produce an additional island, and it doesn't hurt to stick a support someplace that, most likely is not going to hurt anything detail wise. So that is one of the things I urge to prevent failures. There we go, 4 more islands. So again, something you should do. One of the other things I can recommend to prevent failures is to always check your orientations. Make sure your orientations are conducive to a non-suction based print. If you've got hollows, please make sure the holes are facing down, where they're going to be able to drain an air vent. If you don't have hollows, make sure things that are going to create suction, you try to point at an angle, so that way the suction isn't completely force, where it's just going to be popping on and off for this little hole, or anything else is going to be like, a little pocket. That can create more strain on the print. It's not that it's going to create warping or anything like that. In some cases, it'll just create failures. It might just pull it off because it's just too much force. It might not, though. It might not have any effect on it at all. It really just depends on how big the cavity is and how much force that's going to have, size of the printer, all that kind of all weigh into that making a difference. But do keep that in mind when you do take a look or set up an orient a file. It's definitely something to consider. I'll show you what I mean, though, because you can have, like, here, where's the base? The actual base, hang on. I don't think I have that piece imported, but anyway, there's a couple of examples here. I mean, just the deep pockets sometimes can create suction, but these are so small, these little parts, doesn't really make much of a difference. More times you got to worry about suction when you're working with parts that are hollow, because they have, you have to put the holes in. But a lot of times I've seen people forget to either put holes in, or they don't put holes in the right place at the bottom, and they can't drain or air vent quickly enough. And that creates enough of an issue and a vacuum where it can pop that free, and then that's it. The rest of the print's not happening. So you got to be careful with your hollowing, because it's not all types of hollowing or methods of hollowing are created equal. So you do got to keep that in mind. As far as other things you can do to prevent fails, I mean, these are honestly just general recommendations. And I mean failures as in like general failures, like failures with your printer. Please always use screen protectors on your printer. This is something I'm hearing more often. People are just kind of being lazy about it. Don't be lazy about it. They are not that expensive. Get them. Get the screen protectors. Buy them in bulk on Amazon. Just get them. Don't be cheap. As far as other things you can prevent fails, always make sure that you slice your files using either a slicer that you know is going to work, or the native slicer for your particular print system. Now, the reason I say that is because in a lot of cases, this will prevent errors. Folks that are using like Elegoo systems and stuff like that oftentimes will tell me that they'll slice with Lychee slicer, and those slice files will have problems, or they'll get export errors, things like that. But if they're able to take the STL files, they can then bring those into Chi2Box, and then they're able to export those files with better results. So workarounds like this, also like the way I work around between Lychee and Anycubic Photon Workshop to kind of make those files work a little bit for the different printers, like the X2, for example, and occasionally with the Mono 4, just to kind of work around those errors. It works pretty well, and honestly, I don't have a problem with the applications in that sense. It's an extra step I have to take, which is a little annoying, but other than that, you kind of make the workaround, and it prevents a failure, a massive one in that sense, because your print will just kind of stop halfway through and go, nope, I'm not doing this. Sorry. Here's an error. And nothing's more frustrating than going back after like pretty much like hours and hours and hours and going, all right, it should be done. Let me go check on it. Oh, wait, it stops. What's that message say? Oh, there was an error. Oh, yeah, and then you want to be one of those guys that quits. Uh, so anyway, just yeah, remember that kind of tidbit there. Anyway, some other things you can think of as, of course, when you're considering things you don't want to sure your prints don't fail. Don't ever think that one point on an island is ever going to be enough. If your islands are supported by one support, even though it might be a large one, always put a second one next to it, smaller one, maybe next to it, and on the other side as well. Try to encompass um, a perimeter kind of supporting style where if you see a shape, for example, like the bottom of this staff, okay, you'd want to make sure that, first of all, you want to make sure that this whole bottom here is actually supported. And then you want to make sure that the shape of the circle is actually supported. And that's going to get you a better overall shape when that prints. Same thing with the bottom of her feet, here and here. And it's funny, we can actually use the support projection system to kind of do that as well, where you can use that, and we can add more supports to her feet as well this way. And that's a lot faster than having to do it by hand. And it's pretty good. And again, once you go through and check your islands and make sure that everything is fully supported that way, you'll be good to go. But that's if you follow the orientation of the shape, that will help you. Perimeter supporting is a good way to prevent failures or warping or even partial failures. So do keep that in mind the next time you are doing your own support work. And I think that pretty much sums up my list of some of the common stuff that I deal with. There's some other things I can tell you. Don't hollow out parts that don't need them. That's definitely one I can recommend. That'll save you a lot of heartache. Especially things like heads and arms, especially when you're doing like multi-part prints. Even if the character is rather large, usually an arm is pretty thin. I don't recommend hollowing them because what you wind up with resin cavities that they're going to wind up like little vacuum pockets where the resin kind of pulls in and creates an issue that will definitely come back to bite you later. So just be careful about which parts you hollow. The other recommendation there is don't not hollow anything that needs it, like giant blocks and things like that definitely could use the hollowing and save your printer some resin and stress. Don't ever not consider doing it because those objects really you don't need to waste the material. You're just throwing money in the trash for I don't know what to make the object heavier. I understand if you want to use it as some sort of a weight, maybe that makes sense because the material can get rather heavy, especially after it's been cured. So I do get that. That's a possibility. I have printed some larger objects solid, but usually there are things like masks or body plates and stuff like that for cosplay and things like that where you'd want them to be solid, not necessarily hollow. And then obviously some of the other body plates and stuff like that, you'd want them to be hollow because obviously they're going to be too heavy otherwise. So these are all things to consider when you're thinking about that stuff. And I know this kind of journeys off of the realm of failures, but anyway, it was kind of on the topic of what we were discussing. Anyway, if you guys can think of any more ways to fix common failures or what some common failures that you guys have overcome during your 3D printing journeys, please share them in the comments below and let me know what you think. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. We're looking forward to another month of content next month, and, well, we're still going to be here as long as we can. Thanks so much. See you again soon. Bye-bye.